Hello, this is John with Theology Ed. This is part 2 of the Donnie Darko series. And in this part, we're going to take a look at some really, I think, interesting questions. One, we're going to look at the relationship between the first 9/11 and the second 9/11 and what that time in the middle is all about. Why does it exist? What exactly is it there for? Why didn't they just do it all in 2001? Well, what is that? Why does it have to be 2001 and 2020 as opposed to 2002 and 2025 or something, right? Why these years? And then also, I'm going to look at the question of whether real storms are going to be involved. And I'm not going to give a definitive answer there, but I am going to show that it isn't implausible. It is actually sort of plausible to think that it's plausible that they actually were using storms in 2001, and that the storms were important and very relevant as a part of the ritual and their whole, I don't even know how to describe it. I don't think they believe there's real wormholes going on, but in some way it's relevant. It appears relevant in 2001, which makes me suspect that maybe it's relevant in 2020 as well, and we should be keeping an eye on storm activity, especially hurricane activity. So I'm just throwing that out there, and we're going to look into it. I'll explain that. I'll show that there is clear predictive programming going on in Donnie Darko. Again, not that you need more evidence of that, but the attack in 2001, not the Trade Center attack on the U.S., but the U.S. response when it attacks Afghanistan to start the war on terror and all of that, that was also predicted to the date. And okay, so we're going to look at that right now. In Donnie Darko, Donnie talks to his science teacher about time travel after class, and the science teacher gives him this book, The Philosophy of Time Travel, written by Roberta Sparrow. There's Roberta, okay, Roberta Sparrow, called Grandma Death. She had been a nun and a very religious person, and then suddenly one day she just isn't that way at all anymore. She gives up her religion and becomes a scientifically minded person, writes this book and all of that. Of course, what happened was she had gone into a tangent universe during that day and spent a period of time experiencing all this time travel, the crazy things going on, and she probably was, like Donnie, the one who saved the world at the time, comes back into the regular world instead of being killed like Donnie was. She reflects on her life, and it changed as though a few really traumatic weeks had happened, but it seemed like it was overnight to everybody else, right? So that's what happened with her. But anyway, so she has this book that she had written, and Donnie is going to get his hands on it here by way of this teacher. Now, in this conversation that Donnie has with his teacher, we get this scene. Really interesting scene. Here is your Eclipse. Here is Sirius again. This is the black hole, okay? And here is Sirius represented by the Slinky. Now, of course, we saw in the last video, here's your Eclipse. Here's Sirius represented by the eye. We got it here. So we've got this alignment happening. In each case, it is followed by a period of a few weeks before the big event happens, before the end of the world supposedly happens. And so we get that again in the classroom situation when he's talking with the teacher. And what's interesting here is the teacher uses the Slinky to illustrate the wormhole. Says this is the wormhole, that's the idea. Okay, and it can connect two remote points in space and time. So July, this is what I'm saying now. So this July will end, oh no, I have a typo there. We'll rejoin 2001 and 2020. Okay, now that's what I'm going to explain here. So here we have the wormhole. Now what's interesting is the wormhole is Sirius here. But we know from the film that what are they traveling through? This eye. They're traveling through an eye. So the Slinky is an eye, if the wormhole is an eye, okay? And the wormhole is Slinky, but the Slinky. But here we see Sirius represented by the eye. So the eye is the eye, is the wormhole, which is the slinky, which is another confirmation that what we have here is the eclipse and the wormhole, the Sirius symbol. Okay, so they give it to us one more time here. And what is really helpful about this one is this time they make it explicit that the Sirius, that Sirius is the the wormhole. That's the thing that's important here. Okay, now I'm not sure if it's the date when it happens, or if it is Sirius in this position, meaning in conjunction with the sun. So the dog days of summer after the eclipse. So from July 3rd to August 11th in the year 2001, and then next in the year 2020 when you get that same alignment again. If that's what it's about, that whole period of time, that's your wormhole period. I think that's plausible because that alignment stays for a period of time, a few weeks. But what we have here is a connection. This is what will connect two remote points of time. The reason why what started in 2001 has to be finished in 2020, the actual 9/11 attack, which will still take a few years for everything to finish up. But the idea is it needs to pick up where it left off this year in this period after this, is that this is when the wormhole exists here and there. You have to have the same pattern astronomically, okay? Because that wormhole is going to be connecting the 2 points in space and time. That's how I'm understanding it, at least. But what that means is that you have 2001 and 2020 as what will be what basically is the primary universe, continuous. And the period between them, that's going to be the quote-unquote tangent universe. But let's go ahead and look at chapter 1 here. So chapter 1 so here's the book. And chapter 1, we get this. The tangent universe. Incidents when the fabric of the fourth dimension becomes corrupted are incredibly rare. The fourth dimension, of course, is time. And by a corruption in it, I guess that would mean something like it's no longer linear in some way, so that you have some sort of something out of order or out of sync, and this sort of thing. Now, sometimes when that happens to time, a tangent universe occurs. It will be highly unstable, sustaining life for no longer than several weeks. In other words, a short time here. Okay. Eventually, it will collapse upon itself, forming a black hole within the primary universe capable of destroying all existence. So I'm going to draw this up. So here's our primary universe, the red line. In Donnie Darko, that's 1988. In history, that would be 2001. Okay, we're watching that go along. And on October 2nd in 1988 in the film, which is, remember the time in the film was 9 minutes 11 seconds, which is the 9/11 attack when the jet engine falls into Donnie's room, or the airplanes hit a building. That's the 9/11 attack. That is right here. Just before that, Donnie is transported via the portal to a unstable tangent universe. And so when the jet engine hits in the tangent universe, Donnie's on a golf course learning that the end of the world is going to be in 28 days. This period here in Donnie Darko is the 28-day period of time when a very unstable tangent universe exists, at the end of which it will collapse upon itself and go right back up here and risk creating a black hole that will destroy the entire universe. Okay, so what we're looking at then in the film, of course, is 1988 and what happens on October 2nd. What we're looking at history is in 2001, time passes, and before the 9/11 attacks, when the portal happens, when's the portal? That would have been July 3rd through August 11th, somewhere in there, July 3rd to July 5th. That's your Sirius in conjunction with the sun alignment, and that we see with the wormhole right here. That's your wormhole. Okay. So in 2001, that happened here. That was just before the 9/11 attack, right? So that happens. Then after that comes the 9/11 attacks. That's when the plane crashes into the building at the beginning. Then a period of time passes that's unstable. And that period of time continues between the first portal, when that portal happened, and the second one, when that wormhole sort of reconnects. So remember, it's connecting two remote points of time, 2001 to 2020. And so what goes between there is that period that we've just lived through. We're now in the portal again right now. This is July 7th when I'm recording this. July 3rd through August 11th is the Sirius conjunction. Maybe the portal was limited to July 3rd to July 5th. I'm not positive, but the idea is we're here. This is the period of time, and that's being discussed in the film. And that's the end of the what I'll call intermediate period. It's at this point that the collapse of the tangent universe is going to happen, or is happening. And it runs the risk of blowing up, okay, and creating a black hole that would destroy the entire universe. But what was going on in here? Well, in Donnie Darko, this is the period of time when they're getting Donnie ready to save the world. All the other people are doing things like directing him in certain ways, giving him books that are going to help him make the right decisions to save the world. All of that's happening. The film that's the point of the film, and we'll get more into that. But what's happening is he's having all these interactions with people that are designed, especially with Frank the bunny, to get him to save the world when this collapses. Donnie needs to bring him through so that the big risk they're taking doesn't end the world, because they're taking a big risk. What they started in 2001 has to end this period. Has to this period that it created or comes with it has to come to an end at the end of it. And they've got to navigate this terrain very carefully, because it's very dangerous to not destroy the entire universe of the world. And Donnie is going to do it. Now, Donnie, of course, in Donnie Darko, there's all sorts of reasons that you can find online why people believe that's Donald Trump. And it makes sense. And it seems very plausible to me. And if you look at the comments in my to the part one, you'll see some people point this out. That you do some numerology, you look at the medicine bottle. There's a number of things that make it very plausible it's Donald Trump. But first off, his name's Donald, and he wears a shirt in the film Triumph. He's Donald Triumph. Okay, and there's several other reasons, but the idea here is they were getting Trump ready to be the one in position to make sure all of this happens as planned, so that the outcome is best for them, rather than the catastrophes that could happen, because what they're doing is very dangerous. And they know it. Okay. So when we're looking at Donnie Darko, what we're looking at is a story that's saying in 2001, up to the Sirius Sun alignment, the dog days of summer after the solar eclipse, which happened on June 21st in 2001, when up to that point, we have stability. At that point, an unstable, temporary period of time is going to begin that inevitably must end in something very risky and dangerous. That began at that point. Soon after it would be followed up what? It would be followed up with what? The 9/11 attack. That's the airplane attack that hits here right after he enters into this new tangent universe. He's on the golf course and it hits his house. Then that period continues all of which is unstable. It's temporary. This was never meant to last. This was just here to get the laws in place, to give the powers create the powers necessary, so that the president, when Donald Trump has to navigate this final phase, he can do it without destroying the whole world. At which point, it's going to happen in 2020. And they're going to try to do this to where they bring about their entire new world order, if you want to put it that way, without, extinguishing all life on Earth. And that's sort of the big picture. And we're going to have here the storm. The storm. There's a storm coming. There's a storm coming. There's a storm coming. We see that in all sorts of predictive programming in different places. And that storm is associated with this portal again, which takes them back before what? Before the 9/11 attack in 2020, just before it. Okay, so we're going to go back at that same wormhole period. That's what we're in now, from July 3rd to August 11th. And after that, you should expect the continuation of the 9/11 attacks and the continuation of the world in their way. That's, I think, the point, if I understand it. Now, so here you have your 9/11 attack. I should also make a copy of that, really, and put it down here, because you get that attack after he goes here. He's on the golf course when that happens. Then you get the storm down here. And it goes back up to this point. And then you're going to get your next 9/11 on that side after you come back from the wormhole. So that's the idea. I don't have dates for that. I'm not positive dates. But this timeline is going to be, the next 9/11 should be after the portal. Now, if the portal was open, the wormhole was open July 3rd to July 5th, that means the next 9/11 could be at any time now, starting today or yesterday, or that day. After it. In the video, in the film, what is it? It's 28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes, 12 seconds after. Okay? But I don't know that we need to take that literally. So we have this period of time after it. Now, that's what we're watching for. If the wormhole period is from July 3rd to August 11th, then it's after August 11th that we should be waiting now. Another 28 days after that. If it's a literal 28 days, which I don't think it has to be. But if it's 28 days after that, now you're getting close to September 11th again. It's like September 8th, 9th, somewhere around there. All right. But I'm not picking dates. I have no clue what the dates would be. I don't even think that 28 days has to be literal. It isn't literal for this period from 2001 to 2020. What's more important is that you have to have the wormhole with the Sirius conjunction with the sun. Okay? And that's intermediate period. This unstable tangent universe is the period between where those two time periods are reconnected or joined. Now, Chapter 2 is about how these portals are constructed. So you need water and metal. Water and metal are the key elements of time travel. Water is the barrier element for the construction of time portals used as gateways between universes at the tangent vortex. And of course, in this movie, it is the eye. And so he's got this metal knife, for example, and he's hitting the mirror, but he's hitting his eye. And the eye, here's the ripples again. And finally he breaks through. You have all this water symbolism in the eye, symbolism again, and lightning, like a big storm is there. And then the eye is shown with like water flowing through it, and we get the flood in the school. Okay? And it looks a lot bigger than just a little flood at the school. This looks like a catastrophic flood, clearly. And then he's told by the bunny, go do it to the school. And so he gets an axe. He goes to school. He breaks the water main to flood it on, look at the date, we're looking at an October 6th event. That's important. Okay. And he goes out that night. What did he do? After he did the water main, he went out and took the axe and put it in the head of the mongrel. That's the school mascot. But this is a bronze mongrel. That should be impossible to do. And they're all talking about how's that possible? It's not possible. Well, Donnie Darko has superpowers in the film, in the Tangent universe. It's part of the story. And so he puts it in here and he attacks the mongrels. Now, what are the mongrels? Mongrels represent what? Mixed breed dogs, basically. Okay. But you can use it as a derogatory term. People can use it as a derogatory term to refer to people of other races or whatever, as a racist term, as though they're inferior, impure, in some way. If people are thinking like they are neo-Nazis, okay, this is an inferior race, the mongrels. And this is when the mongrels are attacked. Okay, so this is when the strikes go out. Now, in 2001, that happened when they attacked Afghanistan. That was the retaliation. That's when the rest of the people, the mongrels, were attacked. In 2020, who will that be? I think you're looking at China, possibly. You're looking at a war maybe in the Middle East. You're also looking at probably squashing any rebellions, putting down any rebellion or uprisings in the U.S. by minority groups. And perhaps even Christians are involved there, being put down as well. But you're going to have the mongrels attacked. Now, this happened in 2001, or in 1988, in Donnie Darko on October 6th. You get your storm, the flood from a storm, and you get your October mongrel attack. Now, let me show you what happened. Now, we're looking at the question now, moving to the question of, do real storms have to be involved in this? And this is, I think, really interesting. I'm not positive that I don't want to make too much out of it, but I want to make sure you have this information. Of course, here we have a pupil of an eye, and this part's an iris. So just so we have the name, remember that it's an iris. Okay, that's the iris of an eye. There was a hurricane called Hurricane Iris, a Category 4 storm that began October 4th and went through October 9th, 2001. October 6th, it went across the Dominican Republic in that area. It's caused some flooding, rain events, not much damage. There was some loss of life. October 7th, it passed south of Jamaica, and then it finally goes and makes landfall in Belize. It was traveling 21 miles per hour or 33 kilometers per hour and made landfall at 2045. Right? In the last video, we looked at the analysis of us. We saw that the 4 and the 5 can be the 9 and the 2. And you get this sort of thing. That was from Crowley's writing, not just me throwing numbers together in goofy ways. So it's kind of interesting timing. So it made landfall at 2045 local time, the eye of the storm passing over Independence in Belize. Now, that storm was happening at this exact same time on October 6th, the date. Now, look what also happened. On October 6th, President Bush tells congressional leaders about the upcoming attack. And then October 7th, the response begins. That's when the war in Afghanistan started. It was on October 7th. The invasion of Afghanistan was the opening salvo in the United States war on terrorism in response to the September 11th terrorist attacks on New York and Washington, D.C. In other words, it almost looks like they were just waiting to respond to the 9/11 attacks by attacking Afghanistan, quote unquote, by hitting the mongrels until you had the hurricane. The Hurricane Iris, that name has been retired. It was retired after the storm because it was a deadly storm. It hit Belize and killed at least 36 people here and cost $250 million in 2001. It rates it now $250 million in 2001. With inflation, it's more than that now. Okay, and so this was a storm that was storm name that was retired because it was a big storm, and that storm happened. The Iris storm when the mongrel was attacked, which is, I think, interesting. And then when you go to 9/11, the 9/11 attacks, what was happening on September 11th? This is a Weather Channel article. What if Hurricane Erin had hit the East Coast on 9/11? Hurricane Erin was actually right off the coast. This is an actual satellite image of Manhattan on 9/11. There's the smoke. That's the attack. Hurricane Erin and the New York Twin Towers on September 11th at 2:39 UTC. Okay, so again, we have another hurricane very close to the location of the events, the attacks. I don't know if at that time they had the technology to really control the hurricane. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Maybe they were waiting for it to happen, the hurricane to happen. And then maybe that's why the attacks waited until 9/11, just waiting until a natural hurricane occurred. And maybe that's why they waited so long to retaliate after the 9/11 attacks, looking for Hurricane Iris to form. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. If they had the technology, maybe it wasn't as polished as it is now. We know that Bush was really interested to see the effects of Katrina, where he flew over and all of that. That seemed like an experiment to me. Like they were just testing it out to see how well their hurricane control and hurricane modification technology had come along. Maybe at this point they didn't have a whole lot of control of it. Maybe they were wanting it to hit Manhattan. I have no clue. But either way, here's a hurricane that's very close. It was actually causing, some nothing major, but I don't know how to describe it. The surf was rougher that day, okay, along the coast here. And so that was what was going on 9/11. So we had another hurricane right there. I don't want to make too much out of all of that. During that same time, we had two hurricanes out here and a third one forming on September 11th. This is September 13th. This was forming September 11th. It went across Florida while the September 11th attacks were happening between then and September 13th, and actually canceled more flights in Florida one more day after the country's flights were canceled due to the attack. So yeah, this was actually going on, and I don't know how important that is. The interesting thing to me about it is these aren't apocalyptic storms. These are storms that just are associated with the events, almost like they needed it magically, or in their minds, or they needed it for some other reason related to their whatever they're trying to represent by these portals, because they're not literal portals. They're not saying that 2001 is 2020. I don't know what they would say that relationship really is, but in the film, it's represented that way. And that middle period of time is represented as an unstable tangent universe used to prepare to save the world from total destruction when they go through with the final plan in 2020 and following. And so either way, that is what I think is being communicated in Donnie Darko so far. And we'll keep going on Donnie Darko. So this is part 2. I hope you enjoyed it. Like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Thanks a lot. Take care.